Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Jim Reedy. I am an attorney with Sheehan Finney Bass and Green, and this is the New Hampshire Tech Alliance HR Exchange. And just thrilled to be here on this bright, sunny morning, and hopefully signs of early spring, not only in the weather, but also with changes in our economy and with regard to the COVID vaccine and so on. Hopefully, brighter days are ahead. So as we emerge from the days of COVID, hopefully, putting that in the rearview mirror, and looking into what's next, a lot of the things that we sort of paused in the last year or things that we had to take advantage of because of working remote and the like involved technology. And for those of you with kids anything over age 5, know that when we go to use technology instantly as we hit a key, it causes them to roll their eyes and say, just let me do it. But of course, we can't do that in the office. We need to be able to handle technology, and that's especially true in HR. Whether we're talking about the earliest payroll systems to current HR IS technology for everything from recruitment to retention to again, payroll and benefits, but so much more, performance management, and so much more. And I'm thrilled this morning that I get to introduce my friend and colleague, Tracy Spangenberg. I have known Tracy for many years, going back to her days at the Concord Monitor and the HR group in Concord. And we've worked together, but most importantly, I've seen her rise up through the ranks of HR professionals and become a leader in her field, a thought leader in her field. And she's got a busy schedule in that regard. Last night she was presenting with a group, she presenting in today, and I think, again, perhaps tomorrow. In addition to her day job, where she's the VP of HR, Chief People Person with the Granite Group. But she's here to talk to us today and talking about COVID. This was queued up last year, but in the spring of last year, as everything sort of fell apart, we postponed a lot of events. This was supposed to be an in-person event. And of course, now we're not at the place yet to go in person again with the high-tech exchange, but hopefully that will be coming soon. But in the meantime, we're virtual, and what a perfect topic to talk about is HR technology and what's now and what's next. So please join me in welcoming Tracy Spangenberg. Tracy?
Thank you, Jim. And you have the distinction. Sheehan Finney was, I think, ahead of the curve. It was my very first. I had, I think, 7 presentations in 7 weeks all over the country. The very first one that canceled, and I remember going, what? Really, we're doing this now? And then going, oh boy, because I think it was the next day or 2 days later, it was declared a worldwide pandemic. So this is actually a very different presentation, thanks to Jim's suggestions on HR technology and what's now and what's next. We were going to talk a little bit about how to source and select HR tech. And if anybody's interested in that, I can certainly send you some slides from previous presentations. But this is really looking forward toward the future of HR. And if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A, and I'll try to answer them as we go through. And if not, we'll hold them for the end. So I want to talk a little bit about myself, and not because I like to hear myself talk, because I really don't, but I think it's important to inform what the rest of the presentation is like. So as Jim mentioned, we've known each other for decades, really. I spent a long time at the Concord Monitor as the HR director there. Prior to that, I had started in a really large global public transportation company, where I learned a ton, but very quickly learned that I didn't want to work in a large organization for the rest of my life. I really wanted to have an impact in the business. So I was fortunate to have that at the Monitor. And then I was at Sheehan Finney for about 1.5 years. And then I went to a distributor that was kind of transforming into a technology company that was owned by private equity. That was super interesting. And then almost 6 years ago, I joined the Granite Group. And for much of my career, and if you knew me back then, you wouldn't necessarily recognize this, but I certainly recognized it in myself. For much of my career, I was leading compliance first. So I was chasing people around with forms. I was creating rules and processes, and some of that may be necessary, but over the last several years, I've really transformed myself and transformed into a people first leader. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and why that's necessary throughout the presentation. And with that came a lot of learning, a lot of learning. And with that came learning about technology. Because what technology really does in the HR space is helps you automate the things that are routine. So data entry is a big example. It helps you automate that so you can focus on the things that really matter. Your people, designing programs for your people, getting out there and talking to your people when it's safe to do that. So it doesn't take away, it adds. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. So before we get into what the future of HR looks like, even before we get into what the now of HR and HR tech looks like, we really have to understand where we came from and what HR tech used to look like. And that's very interwoven with what HR looked like. And as Jim mentioned, certainly it's there's payroll and there's an HRIS. And for a lot of us, that's what we have, or that's what we had pre-COVID. But there's so much more to that. And really the HR as a discipline started, it's probably been around almost forever in one shape or form. But really in the 1950s, you started to look at industrial relations, and there were formings of personnel departments, and it was very much, I'm going to pay you, and oh, here's these new benefits that you have. And then we really evolved over the years to being much more than that. And we evolved into business partners, and now we evolved into fierce people champions. And when looking at the evolution of HR systems, there are some graphics that go back before 2000, but they're not really terrific. And I thought this was a really interesting graphic to look at where we were and where we sort of are. It's from 2016, but it's actually still relevant to where we are. So if you see, we just talked about benefits, compensation, HRIS. That's kind of where we were around 2000. And that's when I was at the Monitor and really kind of coming into my own as an HR professional and HR leader. And then we got into more integrated talent management with tracking and sourcing and learning management. And again, this varied company by company, definitely started with large companies. Then we got more into cloud-based systems that integrated talent and workforce management, and you saw more performance management integrated into that, succession, managing your workforce. And then we get into kind of where we are now, next generation feedback and performance. So if you aren't already ditching your annual reviews, you'll likely be doing that in the next few years. And I know that's really scary to a lot of us, but if they're not already gone, they will be, because your people will demand them and they'll demand regular feedback. That's been happening a lot faster than I thought it would. Real-time engagement, and we'll talk in a little bit about some systems that really allow you to do that. New recruitment and candidate tools, culture and team productivity, work-life balance, mobile anytime learning, and complete app-based self-service. These were 5 years ago. And a lot of us, these were listed 5 years ago. A lot of us aren't quite there yet. So we may still be back in the 2000s. These are also all things that we could not have conceived of 20 years ago. For the past, gosh, about 5 years ago, I gave my first ever talk. I gave my first ever presentation. I co-presented. I was scared to death. I'm an introvert. You'll see me get progressively more red throughout the course of this presentation. And back then, it gave me the courage to apply to speak at HR Tech, which is a giant HR conference. And a year later, I spoke there. Even back then, and that was 2017, the amount of technology that has come into play and how technology has changed, I could not have even imagined it. But back then, that was 2017, I do remember going on the expo floor and seeing only performance vendors who were pushing regular check-ins and feedback. There were no annual performance review vendors, and that was 4 years ago. So that was really kind of helped me clue into the changing nature of HR tech, helped me learn a ton. I spent a lot of time talking to vendors on the floor. And I really kind of made it my mission to learn more so I could bring more to the people of my company and help my company grow. So we talked about this at the very beginning, understanding and embracing HR technology. I'm going to make a lot of broad sweeping generalizations, maybe not a lot, but a few broad sweeping generalizations in this presentation. So this may not apply to you. I don't mean to be offensive, but I'm going to speak in terms that of what I've seen and observed. I used to teach an HR certification class. I interact with a lot of different professionals from all over all the time. And technology is a blind spot for HR. Again, not everyone, but it's something that we're really sort of fearful of. And the challenges are a lot. I mean, it is a lot. If we got into HR, we got into HR. If we didn't just fall into it, if we chose to get into it, we got into it for the people. And people and technology don't seem to go together, but they really do. So, one of the biggest challenges is that we don't necessarily understand, and what we don't understand, we tend to ignore, or what we're fearful of, we tend to ignore. We tend to stay within our comfort zone. So it's a very uncomfortable place. And hopefully throughout the course of this presentation, we'll make it a little bit more of a comfortable space for those of you who are having some challenges there. So we tend to be afraid of things that we don't understand, and in not understanding technology in general, then you go in and throw in terms like AI on top of that, right? So AI stands for artificial intelligence. It's actually everywhere in everything that we do now. But it's something that seems big and scary for a lot of people. And you'll hear me reference Phil Strazula in a few places throughout this presentation. And he is the founder of Select Software Reviews. He's an HR tech guru. I kind of go to him for all things HR tech and a few other people. But he explained it as this. It's a lot of people think AI will take your jobs, but you really should think of it like an exoskeleton that sits over you and makes you stronger. So rather than taking away jobs, AI is going to help facilitate human interaction. So it can seem scary, but it's here to help us, not hurt us. And again, going back to that fearfulness, one of my last presentations pre-COVID, an in-person presentation back when we did those things, was I did a closing keynote for Mira, their talent conference. And it was at the end of the day, so I had a chance to check out some other presentations. And I had two friends presenting at the same time. One, Phil, that I mentioned, who runs a HR tech company. He was presenting on something like the robots are coming. And then Emma, who presented on talent. And they're both incredible. They both did amazing jobs. I bounced back and forth between the two. So Emma was presenting on talent, a very comfortable subject, talent conference. Makes a lot of sense. She also gave out bobbleheads, which may have helped a little bit, but her room was more than overflowing. And Phil, who they had booked a really large room for, had maybe 20 people. And I talked about this to him the other day, and it was a wonderful presentation. It was super interesting, really accessible. But again, topic really scary for people. And at lunch, I sat around with a bunch of HR professionals from all over, and I asked everybody what they went to and what they thought. And I was trying to also gather some information for my presentation later on. And I asked the table, did any of you attend the presentation on the robots? And the woman next to me said, no, I don't want to know what's going to take over my job. And I went, okay, that's not everybody, but that right there is the sentiment. And that right there, I really want to try to change, because that's just not true. It may be true in some cases, but companies are working so hard on upskilling their workers that I really feel like this is not something that HR professionals have to worry about, at least right now. But we do really have to understand it. So I referenced this a little bit earlier. If you embrace technology, it can really make us more human. And if you look at the past year, we were forced into embracing technology. We were absolutely forced into doing it, a lot of us. In my company, we're very much an in-person company. So we have almost 50 locations all around New England. And we have one office that's co-located with one of our locations. And because we're packed so tightly in that office, we actually all but forced people out early on for a long period of time, and then slowly allowed people to come back in. And we're still only at 50% capacity, which is why my whole team is remote, because we're mostly dealing with people on the phone anyway, and we've paused the visits to the different locations during COVID. So we use the tools that are available to us. We use Google Meet, we use Zoom, we connect with our managers over the phone. You know, those, just because you can't see somebody face to face, just because we're not doing things the way we used to do them, doesn't mean that it's not a valid way of communication. And it doesn't mean that we're not communicating in a human way. I've had really great conversations with people over the phone. I've been able to maintain my relationships over the past year. So that's just one example. It can make us more human, not less, and build those connections. So I referenced personnel a little bit earlier. Back when I started in HR, I had an aunt who worked in personnel. So she was a personnel manager for a law firm, and then she was a personnel manager for Sheehan Finney, which was interesting because I got to follow her in there. But she worked in personnel, and I got to watch what she did, and I thought it was super interesting because I had a real interest in business. I had a real interest in people, and I also had an interest in psychology. So back when I started, and it changed pretty quickly to HR. Back when I started, what HR was personnel. There are still some personnel departments today. Yes, they may be very strategic and still have the name. Name isn't everything, but it does mean something, especially to your people and especially to the people in your departments. So personnel, I tend to think of as more transactional, right? So you are processing payroll. Those were the days when we were just pushing through pay changes, filling out a lot of forms, doing a lot of paperwork. Then when we transformed into human resources, we started to get into things like engagement and performance management and become part of the business and start to have a seat at the table. And now you're seeing more people departments. You saw my title is Chief People Officer. We're transforming into the people department. And it's, who knows what will win. It's sort of like, for those of us who are old enough, that distinction between VHS and beta, and one of them will win, but there can't be both, right? So I think that will eventually, there'll be something. But you're seeing, and it started in tech, a lot of companies with people departments, and that's bleeding out through the rest of companies. I think they tend to be a bit more progressive. I actually posted about this and on LinkedIn not too long ago, but a month ago, and wrote a post about we should really change the name of HR to people departments, because humans are not humans, or not resources, they're people. And I gotten a little bit of a back and forth. It was my most viral post. It wasn't necessarily viral, but for me it was, and a little bit of a back and forth with Dave Ulrich, who's the father of modern HR. So my first thought was, oh my gosh, he commented on my post. And my second thought was, oh no, he doesn't agree with me. And then my third thought was, wow, this is great. These are the discussions that we need to have in HR. We need to be talking about, well, what does it mean for our companies to have HR departments or have people departments? What does it mean if we're still personnel? What does it mean, if we are a people department? I have a friend who is head of humans. Name doesn't really matter, but it can, and it can help sort of change the perception of HR as, the catbird of your company, as the fear-providing, fear-inspiring company, carry outers of the discipline, and that's not who we are. That's not who we are at all anymore. That's who I used to be. That's not who I am anymore. But now, sorry, I was looking at the Q&A. So we're now, this is what the HR professional is now. Coach, mentor, and guide. We help our people grow. Yes, we still do administration. Yes, we may process payroll. Yes, we do have a fair amount of transactional work to do. But when I first started in the profession, we weren't coaches and guides. We really didn't partner with our people. We do now. This is the HR professional of now, and this is sort of where we are or where we should be with HR tech right now. This is something that we're working on at the Granite Group, and it's a multi-year process. It's going to take a really long time. It's going to be very difficult, but I think it's really, really necessary. And this is where I think we're starting now in the world of HR, and HR tech helps facilitate this. We're developing an individualized, personalized experience for our people. So last year, I had the opportunity to bring in a team member to our team, and we don't grow our HR team or people team easily. We look very carefully at headcount in our central services offices, what we call corporate. We did. Now we're actually adding to people. We're creating a talent acquisition function. So it's as we grow, our team is growing, but we didn't. So I had the opportunity to bring somebody in as a people experience manager, and her job, she has other things that she does, like handles workers' comp and our wellness functions, but her job is going to be to help develop that experience end to end, work with our talent team, and make sure that our candidate experience is excellent, whether you get that job or not. Develop a talent pipeline, make sure every candidate is given feedback to that first critical time when you're onboarding. And we're going to have multiple touch points where you come in and you talk with, or either in person or over the phone, with someone on our team who will help you with any onboarding paperwork, and it's all electronic now. And then at the next touch point, you'll have a conversation with someone on our HR team about benefits. And then at the next touch point, we'll check several months in, because we ran some analytics and realized that we were losing people not right away like we thought we would, or when they retired, but at that 6-month mark. So we're going to build in a touch point there to find out what happens. And so that all of that will create this individualized, personalized people experience. And then in that, we're going to weave in learning and development and completely revitalize how we do all of that. And that's where we are now as my company, and we sell toilets. So we are not a tech company. This is not fancy stuff. This is all stuff that we all can do and should be doing as we go forward. And this is the thing that we have to remember. It always starts with our people. Always. Anything that you look at, especially when you look at HR tech, you need to keep your people in mind. Don't put in a system because you like it. Run it through a team of people who, will be using it. The worst thing you can do is just throw in, I know this happens all the time, but throw in a new HR system that nobody uses but the HR department. And so you don't get feedback on how that actually plays out in the real world. But in order to do that, we really have to start with us. We have to educate ourselves. When I talk with HR professionals about this, I hear one thing over and over and over and over and over again. I don't have time. I don't have time. I don't have time. So, and I've been guilty of that in the past, but you don't not have time. I don't know if that's a way to say it, but you have to make the time. With anything that you do, you have to make the time to educate yourself. You need to put your own oxygen mask on first, in work and in life. You need to start with yourself and educate yourself so that you can really help your people, bring your company forward. You have to take the time to do that. And I've seen this quite a bit where an HR pro may have this 30-minute class that they can take that will help them eliminate maybe an hour's worth of work a week. and there isn't time, there isn't time, there isn't time. But the irony is just that 30 minutes could save, 50 plus hours a week over the course of a year. But there's some sort of block with a lot of us, and I've definitely been there, that we don't take the time to do that. We need to, especially with things that scare us, especially with things that scare us. We need to take the time to learn. So in one of the ways, as you're learning and you're designing processes, and this isn't something we're going deeply into because I'm definitely not an expert in this area, but I wanted to throw this up here because we're hearing more and more about design thinking in HR. And there are always these 5 steps in design thinking. And this is something that we're talking about with my team. We're talking a lot about a growth mindset too, because a lot of us, including me, were really living in a fixed mindset and we weren't really allowing ourselves to grow and kind of think outside the box. And while we aren't fully using it, we're trying to use parts of design thinking and certainly empathizing and ideation. But this is something that I would encourage all HR pros to look a little bit more into. So I'll tell you a little bit about our story and why I became really passionate about HR tech and why I talk about HR tech, which still sort of amuses me because it's still my most requested presentation. And I had to learn. I was not an expert by any means. I mean, I think Jim referenced kids helping out with technology. I mean, my son still does that. Our kids still know way more than we do. But when I started at the Granite Group almost 6 years ago, I came into a company with a person and a half in HR, and then me joining the company, and a 51-page new hire packet of paper. All just paper, everything from what you needed to start to benefits. And I had to fill my name in, I think, 16 different places, my name and all of my information. And going back to that people experience, that's sort of not the experience that you want new hires to have. So we set out to change that. And like a lot of HR departments, especially if people like in our company came up from within the company, they had no idea that this was even possible. They had no idea. And so we went through a multi-year effort to really transform what we did with our technology. And we started with a new learning system that was easier to use and required no training. We changed out of performance management, and then we bolted on and added things over time. But we did all of the assessing, the testing, the getting our people involved, all of that. And that's what my previous presentation is kind of more about. But I wanted to throw this in there because one of the best things that we did was our 2 people who are on the team, and our team's larger now, owned these technology processes. It was super scary for them. Super, super scary, but they did amazingly well. And I think sometimes when you're catapulted into that and you're owning it and you have to meet timelines, it really helps. So now we're going to talk a little bit about the must-have HR tech for now. And then we're going to get into some really, really kind of out there stuff. I'm going to just pause for questions. No, I think we're good. All right. So I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that most of you work at a company that has under 1,000 employees. And if you don't, these tech tools may still be applicable, but they may look a little bit different. And there are more what we call enterprise systems that would be more appropriate for you. You hear a lot of people now have Workday. Right, so that's one of the more popular enterprise tools. But that mid-market or that smaller market is really, really hot right now. And there's a lot of technology that's being developed because HR tech companies really started out developing for giant corporations. And then companies, we have 600 people, companies like us really didn't have a choice but to adopt some of that technology. And now there's a lot of technology being made just for us. So I talked to my friend Phil that I referenced earlier with Select Software Reviews, and I kind of made my own list and we compared notes, and this is what we came up with. So if you have under 1,000 people, this is the must-have technology that you need to have. An applicant tracking system if you're hiring more than 30 people a year. We did not have one when I started at the Granite Group. We do now, and it does a lot of things. It does, you know, provides feedback, not feedback per se, but it provides at least an email to the candidates to let them know where they are in the process. It gives us some analytics. We can pull a lot of data from that because it ties into our payroll system. That's something we wanted. You may not want or need that, but that applicant tracking system, and hopefully something that will be with you as you grow, is really, really necessary to have if you're hiring, you know, more than a couple dozen people. In HRIS and payroll, ideally an HRIS with self-service for your managers and your people. And you may say, well, that's crazy. Everybody has that. Not everybody has that. There are still people that are, and probably people watching now, are using an HRIS on a spreadsheet, and that may work for you. But as you grow even a little bit, an HRIS system becomes more necessary. Some sort of electronic timekeeping if you have hourly people. Benefits through either a broker or some other platform. A lot of brokers, I think most brokers of any size, have some sort of benefits platform that can help you automate that process, which is really, really painful for your people. Again, we're looking at all of this through the lens of your people. And you should really talk to your broker, if you do use a benefits broker, about HR technology. We'll talk a little bit about Clubhouse later on, but I've been dabbling in Clubhouse. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's an audio only social media app for iPhone users. Right now it's in beta, so it's an invite only, but it has incredible conversations about everything. It's not HR specific, but there are a lot of HR conversations. There are a lot of HR tech conversations. There's a lot of conversations about everything, and I've learned a ton. And there's a benefits broker who pops up into a lot of the HR rooms. And he was talking the other day that most people don't know to ask, and you may, but there are incredible tools that your broker either has or has access to, and we'll talk about a couple of them later, that you may not know are there, or that your individual broker may not know are there, but they may have access to them through a wider network. So anything that you do with technology, not just benefits technology, talk to your broker about that. Some type of performance management system, ideally something that's based on OKRs or one-on-ones, and then onboarding. Onboarding was just absolutely transformative for us. So when we're hiring people from dozens of different locations, all different kinds of jobs, and having to collect that paperwork, that was one of the first things that we did. That was incredibly transformative. When I did this presentation, even as recently as a few months ago, I used to talk about, for anybody, picking the best in breed. So this was, say, okay, I've got some tech needs. I have a basic HRIS and payroll, but I also want compensation and performance, and I want background checks, and I want, something that will, some engagement solution that will sit over the program that I have, the main program. So I used to tell people, well, pick this, pick this, pick this, and pick this. And because all the APIs, so that bridge between the two different pieces of software, were so good, and really anything can work with anything else. And then I had another conversation with Phil, and he was talking about, that works for larger companies, but that all-in-one solution, those are getting so good now that it's so much easier for smaller companies to look at an all-in-one solution. So now I'm making things a lot easier for you, and I'm taking back everything I said about the best in breed for the smaller companies, and we're going to talk about some of these all-in-one solutions. And some of these you may have heard of, some of these you may have not heard of. So this comes right from Phil. I'm familiar with all of these companies. They're all terrific. There are also other terrific options, but we'll talk a little bit about them. UKG is Ultimate, or UltiPro, the Ultimate Kronos group that merged. And they are really beloved with people who use them. They have everything, and it's all in one. Clear Company is another one that partners with ADP, which is what we have, and they have a lot of different solutions. They have an end-to-end solution, I believe, or they can partner with anything. Bamboo HR is the one that I recommend the most for smaller companies. That is an all-in-one solution. It's really terrific. People who have it love it. Greenhouse is an ATS and an onboarding solution, and I am hearing that all the time. And again, lots of people use that. Hi Bob, up in the upper right, is a company out of Israel that's an all-in-one, but without an ATS, so they should have one relatively soon. And Fresh Team is out of India. I've actually worked with them. I did a leadership series with them. They're wonderful to work with. They don't push themselves. And something that we'll talk about a little bit more, a lot of these companies are doing really great things with building communities. So that's sort of the new frontier in technology companies. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go, but keep these in mind. Bamboo, particularly if you are looking at, if you're a smaller company and you want an all-in-one solution. So let's talk about what's next. So I love this quote from Peter Drucker: "The best way to predict the future is to create it." So as we all know, COVID-19 really changed things, really rocketed us into a place where we have to really think differently. And a lot of us weren't prepared. Now, my company was prepared because we're already distributed and we already had all of the HR tech tools in place. So we were very fortunate. A lot of places had to figure this out. So we'll go through our about a dozen or so different areas of what is really the future, but it's really the now. These are things that when we're looking at HR tech, we really need to be looking at. It doesn't mean it has to be a separate system for each, but these are things that are going to be integrated into HR and HR tech. So I had a question about, when I say smaller company, what does that mean? How many-ish employees? So anything under 1,000, those were appropriate for. So you may, if you have 10 employees, say, you may want to go with a PEO, where that organization takes on your people as employees and provides everything for you. Or you might want to go with something like a Bamboo, which can handle just about any type of size, but anything under 1,000. If you are, I would say, 500 and over, you might want to look at more robust systems if you're growing, because you want whatever system you have, because a payroll and HRIS conversion is really tough. You want that to grow with you. But if you're very, very small, you may want to consider that PEO, or talk to your broker and see what solutions they might have for you. So we're going to go through a bunch of different things. Next generation feedback, performance, and Greenhouse. Sorry, I'm answering a question. Yes, so I don't use Greenhouse. What I can tell you is that it's incredibly popular. I don't have another slide on it. I know several friends who have converted to it recently. They're doing a great job in the HR tech space. They're getting really involved in different events and conferences. And so actually we are going to be looking at a new ATS, and I am going to look at Greenhouse. So I think I'd be able to provide a little bit more feedback on that in the coming months. In the next generation feedback performance, yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that. That's really, so, and I hate to just kind of differentiate between generations, but this is really being demanded on by the younger generations. I'm Gen X, so millennials and Gen Z, they don't want to wait a year to hear how their performance was. They want feedback in the moment. So I think these tools that we're seeing are more based on that. And the one, and we'll talk about this coming up, that we're really focusing on is 15.5, and that's the dominant one that I've heard coming up. There's tons, but it's built on goals, and it's built on regular one-on-ones with your managers, and it's built on continuous feedback. And it can be up and down, side to side, all over. It can be whatever you want it to be. And that's one of the hallmarks of the new systems that we're seeing. Very flexible. You can make it what you want to be. You fit it to you, not the other way around. So one of the big things that is informing the trends of HR tech is work-life integration. And I don't say work-life balance. I hate that term. It's integration. There's really not, especially with a lot of us working remotely, there's really not a differentiation. And companies are recognizing that. So I remember early in my career developing these hard and fast policies, like you cannot, use a work computer for anything personal ever, and you cannot be on your cell phone while you're at work, and I'm sure there are still companies that are doing that, but as companies have grown to lead with trust and just trust their people to get their work done, those sorts of things have fallen out of favor. And you can't really ask somebody to answer emails and calls at night and not let them take calls and emails personally during the workday. So that integration, and we're going to see that more and more, that the remote may be here to stay for a lot of us. That work-life integration is really, really important for those people who aren't face-to-face with customers, doing your work when you want to and where you want to. So we're hearing a lot about digital nomads. I have a friend her name is Kelly Hartman, and she was the CPO for a company called Flywire. And during COVID, she's single. She flew to a different island and lived there for a month. She was a digital nomad. She just flew to where she could for as long as she could and would bounce from one place to the next. So as companies, we're going to have to adapt to this sort of lifestyle, and we're going to have to fit to our people, not the other way around. And we're going to have to develop tools that fit to our people in the way that they want to live. So that is very much the future, but the future is already here. Remote teams, and we see that a lot. There are companies going remote first now. So yeah, we'll have an office space, but you can lead with remote. We are very much an in-person company, but we have already said if we have people who are working remote, they can do that. They can continue to do that. We're redesigning our office space now and considering whether we have, this is probably not going to fly, but whether we have everyone, including executives, have hybrid shared offices. So I'm trying for that one. I don't know that that's going to work, but with remote teams and with maybe some people in the office, some people remote, or everybody remote, the way you work is different and the tools that you need are different. This may be one of the most important things, if not the most important thing. When I started my career in HR, we did not talk about well-being, and we certainly did not talk about psychological safety. We need to be workplaces that our people feel comfortable bringing their whole selves to work, and that they actually feel emotionally safe, and that they can bring up issues if they have an issue with a coworker or with their boss, where they aren't bullied. And we didn't talk about that. We need to talk about that a lot. We need to ask our people about their mental health. And there are tools, and I don't think I have any of them listed here because some have been around, but they're newer. There are tools to help with that. Actually, we'll touch on one of them in a minute, but there are tools that can help with that. But we have to figure out how to create that culture of psychological safety. A gig economy. So even in a company like ours that is face-to-face, we hire people, we hire some of our retirees, we've hired other people to do projects for us. We will have more and more and more people choose to live in the gig economy, where they just string together a bunch of jobs. And I know people who are doing it now. Provides a lot of satisfaction to some folks. I am risk averse. I'm trying to get better of that. So this scares me to death, but this is the world that we're living in. So you'll continue to hear me talk about this throughout the presentation. We need to design our work for our people and not the other way around. So if we're seeing our people not wanting a 9-to-5 job, and maybe they want to work 20 hours a week and then, paint on the side, or, motivational speak on the side, or do whatever, we need to figure that out and look at that and figure out a way to make that work if that's at all possible. And again, this is really amped up because of COVID, but this is the world that we're living in now. And there are lots of tools that can go along with gig workers, from how to pay them to how to find them. We talked about AI earlier. AI is everywhere. We're all using it now in some way, shape, or form. The chatbot from Amazon is a great example, but it's everywhere and integrated in what we're doing, and it's going to be everywhere more and more. And we'll talk about that in a second. Employee listening. We need to listen more than we talk. That's also new for the world of HR, and there are a lot of tools that can go along with this. One of the things that we're looking at is a company called All Voices, which allows you to interact via text with your people anonymously. You know, I initially had really mixed feelings on this, but we are, and we'll talk about this in a second, diving deeper into diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I really wanted to have a solution in place that, because we really feel like we want to talk to our people and we want our people to feel comfortable coming forward, but I really wanted to have a solution in place in the event that something happened that we needed to know about, so you can actually interact with people anonymously over text. And it's a really interesting way to communicate in a way that's safe for your people, so they feel psychologically safe and that you can resolve issues anonymously. So there are the companies that do that, but All Voices is the one that we're looking at. We'll talk about Josh Bersin in a few minutes, but there was a study that I linked to in the end, a presentation that I linked to at the end that he did at HR Tech, which was virtual last fall. That's coming up in a couple of weeks. It is excellent. You'll learn a ton. I would highly recommend it. And Josh Bersin always pushes out a report. And this is something that came from that meaningful work matters the most. We think of, you know, yeah, people want to come to work for free beer and they want to come to work for, you know, ping pong tables, or it's their coworkers. No, it's their work. It's the work, the meaningful work matters the most by a lot. So we need to be paying attention to that, and we need to be able to design our tools around that. And that particularly comes into play with something like performance management. Learning is everywhere and doesn't look the same. One of our massive initiatives at the Granite Group is a culture of learning that we're starting later this year. The learning function is changing rapidly. We adapted about 5 years ago and brought in a program called Bridge, which is a learning, it crowdsources, which crowdsourcing is also huge in the future of HR tech. It crowdsources learning, so anybody can really create learning. And it's largely video based, and it's largely in small bites. But as our attention span gets shorter and shorter, and as we realize we may not need an 8-hour class, we may just need to know how to do something in 2 minutes, learning is adapting to that. So we're actually looking at what we're doing again and trying to figure out how do we get that information to our people in a really easily consumable way. The class that Josh Bersin was going to hold, that's not Josh Bersin, it's called HR Tech. You can just Google HR Technology Conference. It's free. It's great. It is, it's either, I think it's next week or the week after. It's a few days. It's a few hours a day. You can register and watch the sessions later if you want. I linked to it later in the presentation too. And Josh Bersin, I believe he is now, but he usually presents at that. I also linked to his website where you can find his presentation from the fall HR Tech. And he is probably the person I look to the most. I don't know him, but I read the report. It's fascinating. If you can't find it, just send me an email and I'll send it to you. But it is like everything going on in HR Tech. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. A lot of companies have been all over this in recent years, but for a lot of us, including my company, it all started with the racial injustice issues last year, particularly with George Floyd. And so we really took a look at our very white and very male company and decided to do something about it. And there are companies, and I haven't evaluated these because we're not trying to make DEIB a strategy, we're trying to embed it into our culture. So there are tools that kind of deal with that, but we're more going to embed DEIB into our culture and then measure how we're doing. So we're more using analytics tools for that. Speaking of analytics tools, people analytics, predictive analytics, anything that can measure what you have is hot, 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 hot. This is really everything. When I talk to a new person who wants to go in HR, I talk to them about going into the people analytics field. We have an HR generalist on my team, and we are training her to eventually be a people analytics leader. And it is so, so, so important to what we do going forward. And it's going to change the world of work. And it really is already. And here's the thing that I am still trying to wrap my head around this. And so I have some notes on this, so I make sure I get this right. Robot process automation. I've been reading more and more and more about, and this is something that much larger companies are really trying to work on their own. But I think in the future, this is something that we're going to see more often in our own companies. So it's a software robot that mimics human interaction. So if you think of AI as a simulation of human intelligence by machines, robot process automation is a software robot that mimics that interaction. So it's like the arms and the legs of a robot, and AI is like the brain, and they learn over time and they assess data. So RPA can figure out what action to take with data. So it started really in fintech and a lot in banking. But how that plays out in the real world is something like, okay, you've got an RPA system that sits over everything that you do. You're trying to get better with promoting women in the workplace. So you can use RPA to figure out, these women that are performing really well, what was the differentiator? Well, it turns out that differentiator was they have some sort of email relationship with the CEO where they're getting advice. And so now you can leverage that CEO to, maybe we need to get you interacting with more women because these people tend to get promoted faster. So that's just one example. It is big. It is really out there. It is next gen, but it is coming, and it's something that I'm personally trying to wrap my head around and trying to understand a lot deeper. And we said the same thing about AI, 5, 6, 7 years ago. Talent, your people, talent management, talent development, talent, your people, talent, everything. You'll see talent departments emerge in companies, even relatively small. My company, 600 people. Everything is about people. I have a friend who works for Ralph Lauren. Her name's Victoria Shepard. And I don't know if she coined this, but she said this the other day and I loved it. Talent development is the new learning. So everything's going to be focused on your people. The tools will be around your people, and we have to design for that. If any of you have read Betting on You by Laurie Ruettimann, I love Laurie Ruettimann. She's a great follow on any social media. And she also wrote a book called Betting on You, which is all about putting yourself first. So I loved it. I read it. I adored it. It's all about that. But she came from the world of HR, and now she is a speaker and a coach and runs her own business. And this isn't a quote exactly, but she talks about this in her book. And I thought this was really fascinating. So she talked about the HR departments of the future will be filled with data scientists and psychologists. This isn't something that we're used to now, but this touches on two of the big things that we talked about: people analytics. We need data scientists to figure that out, and psychologists. So the well-being being fully integrated into the workforce. So this is something I really do think we can expect in the future. The new frontier for business to business, SaaS companies, tech companies is community building. I talked with Phil about this last week because I'm seeing this more and more. So if any of you are on Twitter, if any of you are on LinkedIn, there's a thing called the hashtag HR community. And it's a very welcoming place for people to interact with one another, because Twitter can be just an awful, awful space. That HR community is incredibly welcoming. I haven't always had the support in my career that I would have loved. And when I discovered this HR community a few years ago, my life really changed for the better. But that HR community doesn't just include HR folks. That HR community includes people in all kinds of businesses, including tech companies. And what some of the smartest tech companies have figured out, and we're going to see this more and more, this is very much the future of HR and the HR tech. They have figured out that they can build communities and bring people together, and then that will launch their tech software. So there's the best one that I'm involved in, and there are lots of them. And this is for chief people officers or heads of HR only. It's a invite or nomination process only, but it's from a company called Twine, and it's called CPO HQ. And what they do is they have a people analytics platform. But what they did was leverage that platform and build a super cool interactive community online. And it's just, people can post questions, there are polls, there are different learnings, there are articles, and it's built by and for CPOs. Really cool. There's another one I'm involved with called Benny. That's a benefits company that built that. They're a benefits company that's built on technology, and they use that technology to build a platform for all kinds of benefits to professionals to interact. You see that in a low tech space with the Boston HR Council, and that was by Lockton. Again, it's not a tech company, but it is a company that was really forward thinking and building a community of HR professionals. There are lots and lots out there. This is very much the future, and it's very much going to help these small tech companies like Twine really build their community. So this is pretty neat. I had a conversation, I didn't have a conversation, I listened to a conversation on Clubhouse that I referenced earlier, that kind of new social media platform with Lars Schmidt. And if you haven't read his book called Redefining HR, you should. And you can follow him on social media at Lars. It's called Redefining HR. It was written during COVID and really super updated, and all things very modern HR, very heavily into HR tech. It's excellent. And then Craig Fisher. See question. Presentation. Yeah, I believe that that's sent out. If not, I can send it to Liz and she can send it out. So these are some of the kind of next gen HR tech presentations or HR tech companies that we're looking at. And again, I'm going to take my notes because I just put the logos here. These are new companies. HR tech companies are popping up all of the time. And this came out from two experts in the field. So Candy Jar is something that sits over your Google browser and helps you recruit while you're online, which is super neat. Sourcewell is a sourcing tool that integrates with email and plugs into your ATS and supposedly reaches candidates 3 times faster. Cooler is in beta and helps you do engagement for remote teams in Slack. HeyKona.com also does something similar. And then AllSorter formats resumes to a standard, so it's easier to integrate into the ATS. And then I think there was one more. Visage is in the recruitment space for crowdsourcing sourcing. And we're talking about crowdsourcing a lot in HR. Think of that as sort of like a referral. So these are particularly in the talent space and particularly in beta, but these are really interesting in companies you should watch. Now, like any company, like any restaurant, any, bricks and mortar company, a lot of these companies will make it, a lot of these companies won't. But it's really fun to look at this next generation of HR tech. So if you are on Clubhouse, Lars and Craig have regular conversations. You can follow them both there about this bleeding edge, what's next in HR tech. And this is really kind of out there HR tech. They also talked about in this same conversation that anything that helps with remote collaboration, wellness, engagement, loneliness we didn't really talk about, but that's been a massive factor. really before this. I actually was in an article on loneliness a couple of years ago because we were seeing that in the workplace. But now with people remote, not everybody loves working from home. And there's just this factor of loneliness. Even in the office, when I go into our office, it feels very lonely because everybody's there with masks on and nobody's getting together for meetings and there isn't that water cooler conversation. So that's a huge opportunity for HR tech to come into and disrupt. Same thing with diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We're all going to be talking about that. We all should be talking about that. Crowdsourcing, looking way beyond us saying to our people, this is how we do it, and getting our people involved. I talked about we started crowdsourcing learning 5 years ago, and we'll continue to do that with all kinds of things. As HR professionals, it's a little bit tough to wrap our heads around sometimes, but it's really going to change the way we work. And then communicating through very simple visuals or graphics. Jack Butcher, I referenced, they didn't really look into that, but I wrote that down and that's something I want to explore a little bit further. So I included a couple. I mentioned Josh Bersin earlier, and for those who are putting in the Q&A, can we get a copy? Yes, we'll make sure you get a copy of this. Josh Bersin at the HR Tech Conference presented on the future of work, and particularly when it pertains to HR tech and how that's going to just really change the way we do things. And I included a couple of slides that not directly from that presentation, but that I just found through Google that I thought were really relevant. So well-being landing in the boardroom. Again, this is not something that we talked about years ago. This is not something that we're necessarily comfortable about talking about, but there are so many research projects that have been done on the impact of well-being and health and employee vitality on performance. So if you look at the end of this curve here, you're recognizing your people skills, they have the skills they need, the environment they're happy with, they're being rewarded, they have good leadership. You cannot underestimate the impact of good leadership. They have clear goals, opportunities for growth. Your company will perform better. So all of those things are the company, but all of these things go into it. Positive thinking, culture fit. I don't love the term. I use culture add, not culture fit. But if they feel like they're comfortable in that culture, they're happy with their career. And then you have the things like medical benefits. Those are important. They all go in. It all goes into your well-being, and happy people make happy companies. That's simplifying it, but there is data and research that ties to that. And I love this. I love this a lot because it talks about the complete employee experience. And what you're seeing here are things like meaningful work, hands-on management, a positive environment, health and well-being, opportunity for growth, and trust in your leadership. You really need all of these things to have a positive employee experience. And some of these things weren't really things that we were talking about. That health and well-being, sure, we touched on that. Meaningful work, maybe we touched on that. A positive environment. Finally, companies are realizing that these are things that are necessary, and there are tools that can sit on top of all of this and go with all of this. I wanted to touch on, I've got a few more minutes and then we'll take a few questions, but I wanted to touch on a couple of major disruptions coming up in the HR tech space and two huge companies. So ADP, there are different names for this. It was called LifeOn. I think it's got a different name now, but we have ADP and we have Workforce Now, and it's good. The tech is good. The service is not. And it tends to be expensive, but they have this next generation product that's going to eventually come in and replace Workforce Now if you're using it. And all of the analysts are super buzzing about it. So I've talked to my rep, I'm like, I want this, I want this now. I don't even know what it is, but it sounds super cool. But that's coming down in the next year or two. We're going to start to see more of that. But there's an incubation hub that's been developing that for ADP, which you don't think of as being on the bleeding edge of HR tech, but they are. And then there's Microsoft Viva. So we're actually in the middle of a conversion from a G Suite company to a Microsoft company. And it's going to be a bit of a bump because a lot of our people have been on Google for a while. But what we get with Microsoft and what we get with Microsoft Teams and what we get with Viva, which is here, but not fully here yet, is something that is going to completely disrupt the market in that it's going to have everything that you need for your people. And I mean, it has everything: learning and development and engagement and a completely revitalized intranet, and it can integrate with any sorts of HRIS that you have, and it brings in Teams for collaboration. It has everything. I got to watch a presentation on that a couple weeks ago, and our VP of IT did too, and we're both like, wow, I can't wait till it's fully launched, which I think won't be till later this year. So if you like this sort of next gen HR tech type of stuff, these are two companies that you've definitely heard of and that you should definitely watch what's coming out here. And it can be overwhelming, right? So this is all super overwhelming finding this. This is a company called Gila Solutions. It's somebody you can hire. They're out of California. They're working virtually. I know Bhaskaran. I met him at HR, was it SHRM? A couple years ago. We were both doing some work with SHRM, and you can hire that company. There was another one that I recommended, but they got acquired. And Select Software Reviews and Shortlister are both free, both really cool resources that run a little bit differently. Select Software looks at demos for all different verticals of HR software and ranks them, and it's completely unbiased. Shortlister, you can go in and you have to register, and right now it's free, but you can go in and type, you know, I'm looking for onboarding software. And you put in your company size, you put in the features that you're looking for, and it will spit out ranked information ranked by other users of the system. So it's new, it's really, really neat. And that's fun. So the questions, yes, I'm going to answer this one because this is fun. So where do I find these things and do I ever sleep? So I get asked a lot how I fit everything in. And it's the same answer. If you love something, you know, you fit it in. So as I'm preparing for a presentation, it helps me in my current job. So as I'm getting all of this information together, you know, I have a day job. It helps me learn, and it helps me, you know, talk to my CEO about where we need to go. It helps us transform into a people first company. It helps. So yes, it's a lot, but it's super fun, and I've learned to love technology. And speaking of loving technology, we'll go through quickly some of the technology that I really love, and we'll talk briefly about this. So the next few slides are slides from companies of friends. So this is called HR Geckos. This is a woman named Jay Pulaki who created this company. It's really, really neat. It's basically an HR service center that uses AI and machine learning to kind of sit over what you've got and spit out things that might be interesting to your people and that can help you utilize analytics more effectively. She is in beta now. She is looking for testers to use this potentially for free. So you can email info@hrsolve.com, drop my name. She's terrific. And she does a lot of other things. She's got a podcast, and but this is really, really cool. She's also super integrated into the HR community, as is Nikki Hoyland. And this is Nikki's program. And you can go to Hooler.com. And this is, again, we're seeing this a lot where you can engage, bring all of your systems into one place that is visually stimulating. You click here for holiday requests, you click here for policies, you click here to go to this, and it looks really, really cool. And it brings everything onto one page or a couple of pages. And so your people don't have to go to 19 different websites. And I can connect you to Nikki if that's something that you like. Oh, actually, follow her at the Nikki H. I have her on social media, and she's also part of the HR community. And I have one more question. Not a question. All right, so here are some of my favorite pieces of tech or ones that I've worked for. Predictive index. We've been a long time fan of PI. Super, super love it. It's changed a ton. It has changed the way we work at the Granite Group, and it has changed me personally in many, many ways. There's 6-minute assessments that do so much more, goes into coaching and team building and strategy and far beyond that. I also use, oops, what did I have? Bridge, there it is, Bridge over on the right. That's that learning platform that we use. We're analyzing 15.5 in the middle in the orange, and 15.5 is, people love it. It sort of brings in all things performance, succession planning, feedback, rewards and recognition, all tied into one. And you're seeing more and more companies do things like that. Culture Amp is changing, and Culture Amp was kind of more the engagement, and they're doing a lot more now. Forgent is based on sentiment analysis. It's a startup out of Harvard, and occasionally I'm going to say things that will piss people off, and this will be one of them, but the annual engagement survey is pretty much dead. We just do them that for when we have to, for, you know, entering into different contests and whatnot. And the new HR tech and the new way of doing that is through either pulse surveys, mini questions that are done regularly, or what Forgent does in sentiment analysis. How are you feeling in the moment, and measuring that data over time? So you're gathering information in smaller bites and more frequently. You're not gathering that only once a year, because that data is only telling you what happened at that point in time, and people don't want to answer, you know, 60, 70, 80 questions. People G2, these are, and the rest of the companies are companies that have done some things for. People G2 is background check. Namely is actually a really good platform for really smaller companies. People Hum, that's out of, I think they're out of Sri Lanka. I've done some leadership work with them. Reward Gateway, I love as an engagement platform. People Productive, and Behave4. That's Francisco Reyes. He's out of Spain, and he's developed, I had never heard of this before I met him, a platform, an assessment platform based on behavioral economics. Super, super cool. Definitely something that you should follow. So, okay, I want to weave this in. Good for people who work with computers. 90% of my staff don't touch a computer their whole career. Most staff do carry their own smartphones. This is exactly like our company, exactly like our company. So everything that I'm showing you, these aren't necessarily things for high tech companies. Some of them can be, but everything that I'm showing you are things that we could have looked at for our company that is 90%, you know, don't have their own computer, right? So I think you should look at everything. I think you should look at Bamboo. I think you should look at, depends on what you're looking for. And I'd be happy to connect with you offline. Just-in-time smart tutors, I have not. It's a tool for supporting independent learning and student instructor communication. That sounds really cool. Yeah, we could talk for days and days and weeks about really cool HR tech tools. There's a lot, and we didn't cover it here now in coaching for your people. But yes, that question was right. It's a lot. It's a lot. And if your workforce, like mine, is not into, is not really computer savvy, you have to design for that. Back when we talked about design thinking, you really have to look at that. I learned this from Jason Averbrook, who runs LeapGen. You have to look at, when you're looking at HR tech, personas. So for example, the personas, and this came from marketing, the personas at Southwest are in the air, on the ground, and in the office. So you may be designing your tech for people on the ground differently than you're designing them for people in the office or in the air. So you have to look at the people in the organization, and you have to design your tech for the people, because our people are the future. You need to be on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, you need to be on there. There's some great conversations happening there. And here are some virtual conferences. And yes, everybody will get a copy of this. Ton of resources. and I just wanted to close with the HR professional of the future embraces tech, is agile, innovative, bold, risk-taking, empathetic, and vulnerable, understands the business, and aligns people and business strategies. A connector, a coach, a social justice and responsibility champion, a strategic visionary, and above all, a fierce people advocate. And you can be the future right now. All right, so here's any questions? I'm gonna look at the Q&A. Before we close out. Nikki, yeah. All right, Hooler.io, thank you for coming. Great. So Nikki, I probably did not do that justice on explaining what she does. It's super, super cool, and thank you for being here. So Nikki is the CEO of Hooler, and I'm very happy she was here to support that. And that's all I got. Back to you, Jim.
Well, thank you so much, Tracy. What a great program and great insights as always. Again, the benefit of being in HR as it has evolved over the years and companies as they've evolved, and basically being a student and a constant learner. I think that, if we don't try to keep up, we will get stale. And that certainly is not someone that could tag you with that title, because you're a constant learner. And so we certainly appreciate that. I love the insights, love the adaptability to various types of organizations and the many suggestions. Great feedback this morning from our many participants in the Tech Exchange. And of course, it doesn't just mean high-tech companies. It can be companies of all types and sizes and organizations. So thanks, Tracy. So next month, we're back to wage and hour. And that's going to be on April 14th. We're going to talk about federal and state wage and hour developments. And of course, there is movement on both the state and the federal level. And that will be Brian Bouchard talking with us. That's, again, April 14th from 8:15 to 9:30. This program is eligible for SHRM credits, 1.5 credits. And the details are on the last page of this presentation. I think, Trace, if you can just advance it, I think we've got the slide on that. I'm pretty sure. There we go. So that's your code. And those are the credits available for this wonderful program. If it were up to me, Tracy, I'd give it 10 credits. So instead of 1.5.
I can talk, I guess. And I just want to come back, and we had a question from Elliot. We sell toilets. We are not a high-tech company by any means, but there is some tech that's appropriate for all companies and that can help you and help your people a lot. So I wanted to be really clear if somebody didn't know what I did.
Well, I will say this, that if there ever was an essential business in COVID, the Granite Group was.
Yes. Yeah, everybody needs toilets, right? I won't say what I usually say when I give presentations, but everybody needs toilets.
Well, again, thank you, Tracy. Thank you all for joining us today. Look forward to joining us at the next session next month. And by the way, we're on the 25th and 27th of May. We'll be holding our 33rd annual Labor and Employment Law Seminar. And why is it the 25th and 27th? Because, again, we're going to be virtual this year, and hopefully this is the last time we're virtual for some time until we have a base on Mars or the moon. And that's the 25th and 27th. It's a 2-day, and it's mornings on both of those 2 days. And we've got a great lineup, and we've got a surprise presenter that we've got in the works right now, too. So look for that on the Sheehan website, just like you can register for the next Tech Exchange event in April on the Sheehan website. Thank you all for joining. Again, a big thanks to Tracy for being a part of this today. Great job. Thanks, guys.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.